Hey YouTube, it's Eric. This video is gonna be pretty quick. I'm just gonna be highlighting that Saint Thomas More, uh, the patron saint of all politicians, statesmen, and lawyers. Saint Thomas More was made the statesman of politicians and lawyers in 1936 when you had the Jesuit trained Joseph Stalin in charge of Soviet Russia. You had the Mussolini with his Jesuit confessor Taci Venturi S.J. in charge of Italy, and you had Roman Catholic born Adolf Hitler with the Jesuit trained Joseph Goebbels and Heinrich Himmler behind Hitler. This was going on at the time when St. Thomas More was made patron saint of all politicians and statesmen. You also had Francisco Franco install his dictatorship in Spain. A full-on fascist Catholic dictatorship was created. Like this was going on when St. Thomas More was made patron saint. You also had Antonio Salazar's fascist dictatorship in Portugal, which was found to be looting millions of dollars in Nazi gold uh, throughout the entire duration of his reign. But and then you also had De la Vera's fascist dictatorship in Ireland when St. Thomas More was made patron saint. And St. Thomas More, like this was in a paper here. This was done by a Marquette University scholar, but this year I linked this: the communistic inclinations of Sir Thomas More. I've read some of Sir Thomas More's book, The Utopia. I haven't read all of it, but I've read some of it, and it definitely is like a blueprint book of communism. It's all about creating like a communal living uh, paradise, quote unquote paradise. We see here, I thought this is interesting from this quote here. I'm just going to read this from this little journal. At the time of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, Lenin himself suggested that more should be included in a monument honoring the great Western thinkers that was erected in the Alexandrovsky Gardens in Moscow. And here is a picture of the monument right here. This is the monument that Lenin made a tribute to his quote unquote Saint Thomas Moron, and quote unquote he's a saint. The whole idea of a saint, the whole idea of a saint is ridiculous. But you see here, here's a prayer to Saint Thomas More, a prayer for lawyers. I know there's a Saint Thomas More Society at Yale University. And they're all over the United States. Chicago, Orange County, New York City. But just quickly here, just a quote from the book from this religious scholar James Woods. He called Sir Thomas More a heretic hunter of the mid 1520s who personally broke into Lutherans' homes and sent men to the stake, and who would punish religious dissidents not only with displeasant words but with state violence. I thought that was it. I linked this in the description here. This article called Thomas More, Inquisitor, Torturer, Killer, Saint. But here's I couldn't find a picture of this Jesuit here, Henry More, but it's just very significant. I think that a Jesuit, like you don't really hear much about Thomas More having a Jesuit descendant, and this is Father Henry More, and he was an English provincial, and you're gonna see here like Henry More was a chaplain to the Jesuit. Um, where was that here? He was a chaplain to the Jesuit. Uh, yeah, Lord Petre right here. Lord Edward or Baron Petrie was the Jesuit. He was a Jesuit priest who was appointed Privy Councillor by King James II. Oh, oh, is this a different Petrie? Oh, so yeah, so this is the Petrie family. Okay, so I'm sure Baron Petrie is probably an older relative of the Jesuit Petrie that was King James is a Privy Councillor, but very telling nonetheless. And you see here, Henry More S.J. was the great grandson of Sir Thomas More. There's a photo of Sir Thomas More, who was Lord Chancellor of England. And he also had a cousin named Henry More, born in 1567. So here in the Jesuit, Henry More was born in Essex, according to the majority of the provincial catalogues, though a few of them give Cambridgeshire as the county of his birth. He went to the Jesuit College of St. Omer. That's where John Carroll went. That's where Charles Carroll went, Daniel Carroll. But you can go to the St. Omer's. Um, you can find that on Wikipedia. Yeah, this was the school here. There's some very prominent alumni here. See your William Matthews. This guy William Matthews. Actually, I just ordered a biography on this guy. This William Matthews was a Jesuit priest who founded the public library system in Washington. And I found a picture of William Matthews doing the hidden hand. Thought that was significant. If I can find that. Here it is. Here. There's this Jesuit priest William Matthews, and look what he's doing. That's the Masonic hidden hand pose right there. Yeah, and and like I've wrote a blog piece on it. Like the motto of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry is the same motto as the Jesuit order. But here's back to Henry More, the Jesuit. He made his humanities studies in the College of the English Jesuits at St. Omer and entered the Jesuit novitiate at St. John's, Louvain, November 1607 and 19th November 1607. His higher studies were probably made in Spain, where the Jesuits were founded. In 1614, Henry More S.J. filled the minister office in the English College of St. Alban de Valladolid. I think that was an old Jesuit school in England, or it still is. Now it's a Catholic residence center. Then he held the same office at the Jesuit College of the St. Omer in 1621, and he was professed the four vows. So he was a fourth vow Jesuit. Read the Jesuit fourth vow oath. It's one of the most intense oaths you'll ever read in your life. He's here, and then Henry More was a missionary to the London district. He was one of the Jesuits arrested at the Clerkenwell residence by the officers of the Privy Council in March 1628. 1628. I know there was a Jesuit, like what was his name? There was a couple Jesuits that were executed under when Queen Elizabeth was king. I think one was Edward Campion. Then he became the provincial superior of the Jesuit order. So like this Henry More was a powerful Jesuit. He was the provincial, and he wrote some books here. I'm gonna see if I can maybe find some of these on the internet. He wrote one here, Life and Doctrines of Our Savior Jesus Christ. He wrote an important history of the English Jesuits in 1660, and looks like he translated some other Roman Catholic books here. But like I enjoy, like it's interesting to read books from like these key people. Like I enjoyed James Roosevelt Bailey's, the Catholic priest who was related to Presidents Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt. His book was pretty interesting. You can find that for free. Let me see if I can get a photo of this Henry More, who was a Jesuit. And just like there's been like I've seen it all the time. Like President William Howard Taft, who was a Skull and Bonesman, like who personally went down to New Orleans to speak at the Jesuit school down there. Like William Howard Taft had a younger cousin, Father Robert Francis Taft, S.J., who became a Jesuit, and like there were many Tafts. Like there were probably um, Alfonso Taft was the first prominent Taft in the U.S. government. He was like one of the founders of the Skull and Bones. But there's a Jesuit priest in the Taft family. There's a Jesuit priest in the Dulles family, the descendant of Allen and John Foster Dulles. Let me see. Yeah, I don't think you can find a photo of this guy here. Um, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. And like Sir Thomas More was made patron saint of all statesmen and lawyers, like right in the thick of like fascism. You had Stalin, Mussolini in power, you had Franco in power, Salazar in power, Adolf Hitler in power. Yeah, I was looking at some of the comments. Yeah, yeah. The Cowboys. Yeah, I'll be rooting for them in the playoffs. They're playing a lot better than I thought. It's nice to see. Oh yeah, absolutely. Trump is a complete puppet. Absolutely. Actually, and Jeremy, I know you're mentioning how you think Trump could possibly get indicted and Pence could be a short-term president. But I found out one of there's a key Jesuit connection to Mike Pence, and this is his key security advisor is Joseph Keith Kellogg. He's a retired lieutenant general in the United States Army. He currently serves as national security advisor to Vice President Mike Pence. Mike Pence had a Catholic upbringing, but you see this Keith Kellogg, who is the national security advisor to Mike Pence, went to Jesuit Santa Clara University, the IHS right there. So like if Trump is impeached, like we're left with the same thing, Mike Pence. controlled by his Jesuit advisor Keith Kellogg, and controlled by like the resident Jesuits at Georgetown and Fordham. And actually, I'll show you here this the Jesuit Joseph T. O'Callahan that I covered that got the Medal of Honor from Harry Truman. I noticed there was like a ship that was named after him, like a full-on Navy ship. It was named after this Jesuit priest who is the Navy chaplain. Here he is here. Um, See, and there's the photo. There's another photo of Truman giving uh, Callahan, who are Jesuit priest here on the right, his Medal of Honor. Um, where was that here? Yeah, so the USS O'Callahan, DE 1051, is a U.S. Navy destroyer reclassified as a frigate who is named in his honor. So you have the USS O'Callahan. That reminded me of like there's a USS Gardaquis that was used in the Spanish-American War that was named after the Jesuit agent Diego Gardaquis, who was the Spanish ambassador to America, who I wrote a post on, who was like John Carroll was praising Diego de Gardaquis, as like an instrumental asset, basically, essentially, at like the time of the American Revolution. Um, and I know like there's also like a USS Myron Taylor. There's a USS DuPont. Like looking at the names of the Navy ships, like is actually like a very telling thing to do. And this notice how this Jesuit Joseph Timothy Callahan was the United States Navy chaplain. Here's a huge connection. You can find information on this guy here in Aberman Hatton's book, The Dollar in the Vatican. But Francis Matthews, Francis P. Matthews, one-time Secretary of the Navy from 1949 to 1951. Before that he was the 8th Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus. And then he became the United States ambassador to Ireland in 1951 and 1952. Francis P. Matthews was also a papal chamberlain. You can see here he also graduated from Jesuit Creighton University. Okay, and he became like a very high up in the Democratic Party, which at this time in history, the Democratic Party had three back-to-back Jesuit trained leaders of the DNC, that being Frank Commodore Walker, um, Robert Hannigan, and Edward Flynn, all Jesuit trained. Reminded me how, like in the 20s, you had back-to-back Knights of Malta, James Farley and John J. Raskib as head of the DNC, and now you have a Jesuit trained Tom Perez as the head of the DNC. But yeah, this was a big connection here to the Navy, and uh, President Harry Truman, who made the Jesuit priest Callahan, who gave him a Medal of Honor, and who accepted a honorary degree at Fordham, made the Supreme Knight of Columbus, Jesuit trained Francis Matthews, Secretary of the Navy, in 1949. But he's just a big connection here, and you can read about him in Averman Hatton's book, The Dollar in the Vatican. But this was like this Henry More, like Sir Thomas More, who literally was like an inquisitor, had thousands, like was responsible for killing thousands of people in England. Had a descendant who was a Jesuit priest, and Sir Thomas More is like the patron saint of all lawyers, like probably one of the most prominent patron saints of all of them, to be a patron saint of lawyers and politicians. And like Vladimir Lenin admired Sir Thomas More. His book Utopia, I think you can find. Um, you see that there's Sir Thomas More societies all over the place, but you can find copy of Sir Thomas More's Utopia on the internet, and it is basically like a communistic like blueprint. Yeah, I think I'm gonna call it there, guys. But peace and love. And then I added the information about the Jesuit. Um, Actually, more with Truman. Like if you read the article I put together on him going to Fordham, you'll see that he was also close to the seventh Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus, John E. Swift, creating like an anti-capitalist communist labor program. How ironic that like the Knights of Columbus were creating a labor program to show the abuses of unrestrained capitalism, like while they were like preaching a literal like witch hunt against communism at this time, like threatening to excommunicate anyone who like even if there was a threat that you were like talking to a communist, you'd be excommunicated at this time. But I added the information of Joseph Callahan, S.J., into my article on Harry Truman. Yeah, that's all for this one, YouTube. Peace and love, and Nam Nas.